is Saul Bal?
While he had been to prison on multiple occasions, was really a low-level, drug-using, nonviolent offender. And that was quite evident from his criminal history.
Jason Lamb, a criminal defense attorney unaffiliated with the case, looking at it from a legal lens, which may paint a different picture than what some are asking. How was a career criminal felon and drug user like this on the streets in the first place?
And the greatest predictor of reoffending was his obvious drug problem. But that doesn't necessarily translate to the type of violent crime that he is alleged to have committed yesterday.
His previous prison status in Arizona characterized him as low risk, even though he committed crimes all over the state for many years, from Navajo County to Yuma County, Pinal County, Casa Grande, Phoenix, Winslow, then over to Orange County, California, where he spent 2 years in prison for assaulting a police officer. But the issue is, most of the crimes he pleaded guilty to or was convicted of were almost all drug charges and nonviolent offenses, and it's likely California and Arizona weren't communicating about his past.
In a perfect world, the systems would communicate with one another. In the real world, that doesn't happen. The California crimes would not necessarily have been a factor in the Arizona Department of Corrections housing him.
Lamb says Bal was already committing a crime before he allegedly opened fire on the officers last night. Because he was a convicted felon, he could not legally possess a gun, so having it on him was grounds for arrest. Bal would have gotten off community supervision or parole tomorrow for his latest Arizona drug offense, but it's likely the requirements of his parole had no way of stopping what happened.
Once parolees are complying with those basic conditions, there's only so much supervision and oversight that the system is able to provide them.
We did, however, get this booking photo from May of last year when Bal was arrested on charges of criminal trespass, burglary, and drug offenses here in Maricopa County. The charges could have landed him in prison from 1 to 7 years if he was prosecuted, but he was not. Instead, he was released from custody.
The criminal defense attorney says if the officer in critical condition, God forbid, were to pass away, it's very possible, given the situation, Saul Bal could be charged with capital murder and face the death penalty. Bal is being held on a $2 million bond. Derek, I'll send it back to you.
All right, Brianna.